The most feared force at this World Cup isn't a striker, it isn't a manager, it isn't even a country. It doesn't run, it doesn't sweat, it doesn't cramp in the 90th minute. It sits in a windowless room in Dallas, in front of a bank of monitors, and it decides whether the goal you just screamed at your television is allowed to exist. That is not a movie pitch. That is what football has actually turned into this summer. And here is the sentence. FIFA never wanted anyone to have to write. The technology Zurich sold to the world as the cure for controversy has become, by a distance nobody can seriously dispute anymore, the single biggest controversy of the entire tournament. More disallowed goals, more disallowed careers, more red cards than the last 2 World Cups combined, more federations filing formal complaints, more coaches, on the record, saying the officiating specific card, fans in stadium after stadium booing not the players, not the manager, the screen. This wasn't the plan. The plan was to end the arguments. The plan was minimum interference, maximum benefit. What we got instead is a machine that is technically correct, universally distrusted, and eating the sport in real time. So this is the video where we actually go through it, incident by incident, quote by quote, and answer the question honestly. Is VAR now doing more damage to football than the human mistakes it was built to fix? Let's actually get into it, because the story is bigger than any one match. Start with what VAR was supposed to be, because you cannot understand the outrage without it. When VAR arrived roughly 9 years ago, it had a mission statement so short you could stitch it onto a referee's sleeve. 5 words: minimum interference, maximum benefit. That phrase belongs to Mark Geiger, the American referee who worked the 2018 World Cup and later helped train VAR officials for Qatar. He has said it publicly for years, most recently reminding people that the correct question at a monitor was never, "Is the referee right?" It was, "Is the referee clearly and obviously wrong?" Business Insider. Hold that phrase, clearly and obviously wrong. File it. Because the entire scandal of this World Cup lives in the gap between what that phrase used to mean and what FIFA has quietly turned it into. Ahead of this tournament, FIFA's chief refereeing officer Pierluigi Collina and the game's lawmakers didn't scale VAR back. They cranked it up. They deliberately expanded the system into 4 new areas, including second yellow cards and corner kick awards, meaning the video room now has permission to reach into moments that used to belong to the man on the pitch and nobody else. AS.com. Now look at the numbers, because the numbers are staggering. Reuters reported that VAR interventions in 2026 blew past the totals from the 64-game 2018 and 2022 tournaments combined, and did so before the quarterfinals even began. Reuters, the LA Times, tracking the same data, counted more than 100 VAR interventions across the tournament. LA Times. Then there's the discipline. Northeastern University's own data desk crunched it. Red cards this World Cup have more than tripled compared to 2018 and 2022. 13 straight reds before the quarterfinals. The 2022 rate was 0.016 red cards per match. The 2026 rate is 0.141. That is not a bump. That is nearly a 9-fold jump. Northeastern News 13. 0 of them. In 2018 or 2022, at this stage, 13. That is what minimum interference looks like when you plug it into a wall socket and turn it up to 11. And this is where you have to look at what those interventions actually did to real teams, because a spreadsheet doesn't scream. Fans do. Croatia versus Portugal, round of 32, deep into stoppage time. Croatia, in what looked like Luka Modric's final act in a Croatia shirt, scrambled home an equalizer that sent the country into raptures. Then, more than 2 minutes later, a screen took it away, because a Croatian player, on the ball's flight path, had brushed it with his hair, leaving a teammate marginally offside. The naked eye couldn't see it. The ball didn't visibly deflect. A sensor inside the ball registered the touch. Goal gone. Career gone. BBC Sport. Modric afterwards. What did the referee tell us? That Matanovic touched the ball. But we've watched VAR as either being used incorrectly or selectively depending on the size of the team. Reddit thread archiving Marca interview. His federation went further and wrote to FIFA directly, calling FIFA's application of the technology an abuse. A federation that once campaigned for VAR calling FIFA's use of VAR abuse. Let that sit. FIFA's response, via a technical statement, was that the goal had been correctly disallowed. The ball tracking chip did its job. The letter of the law was applied. Espan, they may even be right. That is somehow the worst part. Iran. 3 separate goals disallowed by VAR across the group stage. One of them, in stoppage time against Egypt, was ruled out because a striker had a toe offside. The goal that, in real time, would have put Iran into the knockouts. Al Jazeera A Stadium, briefly, thought it had witnessed history. Then a still frame from a chip in the ball ended their tournament. Egypt, 2-0 up on Argentina in the round of 16, dreaming of a real upset, then watched a goal from Mostafa Zico chalked off after VAR pulled the referee to a monitor for a foul the officiating team had missed in real time, nearly the length of the pitch away from the ball. Yahoo Sports/sports.yahoo minutes later, a penalty shout at the other end went unchecked. Argentina won 3-2. Head coach Hossam Hassan's federation filed a formal complaint. Al Jazeera, Switzerland. Quarterfinal, Argentina again. Briel Embolo went down under a challenge from Leandro Paredes. The referee originally reached for a yellow card for the Argentine. VAR then called the referee over for what was officially categorized as a mistaken identity review. He came back from the screen and did the opposite of what the review category is supposed to be for. He booked Embolo for his second yellow for simulation and sent him off. The Guardian Espan, the BBC's own rules analyst on air, openly questioned whether the intervention even qualified as mistaken identity under the protocol. Swiss defender Manuel Akanji, near tears in the mixed zone afterwards, said he had never experienced a game so one-sided. Switzerland lost 3-1 in extra time. Ousmane T versus Belgium. Folarin Balogun, a straight red after a VAR review, ruled by referee Raphael Claus. The decision was so widely condemned that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, personally called FIFA President Gianni Infantino to ask for it to be reviewed. Trump later confirmed the call on the record. "I asked for a review because I didn't think it was a foul." CNBC. The red card suspension was quietly lifted. Balogun played the next game. ESPN The Guardian. Read that last paragraph twice. A World Cup red card was reversed in the same news cycle in which a head of state phoned FIFA about it. That is where refereeing lives now. Every one of these incidents, every single one, traces back to the same screen. Every one is technically defensible under the letter of the protocol. And every one, stacked next to the others, produces a picture that is not defensible at all. Because here is the deeper problem, and it's the one Christina Unkel, the former FIFA referee now working as a rules analyst for ITV, keeps pointing at. She has been saying on air throughout the tournament that VAR intervening on things like corner kick awards is re-refereeing the game, not correcting it. Talk sport. That distinction matters. Correcting a clear and obvious error is the founding purpose. Re-refereeing every 50-50 moment under a microscope is a different job. One VAR was never designed to do. And there is the slow-motion trap on top of it all. Under a freeze frame at quarter speed, any boot near an ankle looks like a war crime. Youth Mead defender Chris Richards, asked earlier this year about the reviews, shrugged. Look under anything with a microscope, you could probably find something. That is the entire problem in one sentence. If you examine any goal, any tackle, any corner in enough forensic detail, you will always find a technicality. Which means every goal now lives on probation until a computer signs the release papers. And to understand why this hurts, you have to understand what VAR was born from. Because this didn't start in 2026, and it didn't start in Qatar. It started in the specific, generational injustices that made a global sport promise itself never again. Maradona, 1986. The Hand of God. A goal punched into England's net that a referee didn't see, that a linesman didn't flag, and that helped decide a World Cup. That moment lived in football's bloodstream for decades. It's the DNA of every argument for the technology. Bruce Arena, the American coach at the 2002 World Cup, still talks about a quarterfinal against Germany in which a German handball on the line was missed, and the United States went out. It was a 100% penalty, Arena said afterwards. I hate to say we were cheated out of it. We had the momentum. The Guardian, 2002. He has said in more recent interviews that with today's tools, that USA side may have made the semi-final. He's probably right. That is the reservoir VAR was drawing from, not a desire to slow the game down, a desire to make sure the specific, gut-punch, career-defining robberies stopped happening. The catch was always meant to be the biggest of the biggest, a Maradona fist, a Frings arm on the line, not a hair follicle, not a toenail. But every technology once deployed wants to expand. And this one has. Kalina's expansion, adding VAR intervention to 4 new categories of decision before this tournament, is exactly the kind of mission creep Reuters headlined in its investigative piece on the whole story. Reuters, the founding scope was narrow. The current scope isn't. And the safety net that was supposed to sit quietly in the background has grown into a second referee, one that never gets tired, never gets shouted at, and never has to feel the atmosphere in the stadium when it wipes out a goal. The Croatian Federation didn't call it a mistake. They called it abuse. That word, from an official body, in writing, to FIFA, is not the reaction you get when a technology is doing what it was invented to do. It's the reaction you get when the tool has drifted so far from its original purpose that the people it was built to protect no longer recognize it. There is a moment in every institution's life where the cure becomes the disease. The medicine that saved the patient becomes the thing that's now poisoning them because the dose kept going up. Football, by every credible measure, Reuters, the BBC, the LA Times, Northeastern University's data desk, is in that moment right now. And the person most responsible for that expansion, publicly, is not hiding from it. Pierluigi Collina, in the middle of the tournament, defended the calls directly and framed the increased interventions as evidence the system was working. Reuters' Infantino asked about the growing anger from federations and fans, told everyone to chill, saying that screaming and shouting does not find a solution. The Guardian, chill. To Croatia, to Iran, to Egypt, to Switzerland, to the American Federation that had to call the White House, chill. You start to understand why the accusation isn't just that the technology is broken. The accusation is that the people running it don't believe it is. Now let's be fair, because we don't do cheap outrage here. The uncomfortable, inconvenient truth is that VAR at this World Cup is usually right. Most of those 100-plus interventions corrected genuine errors. Balogun's tackle, once slowed down, was a heavier challenge than it looked in real time. Reasonable people can argue red or yellow, but nothing is not an option. Croatia's disallowed goal really was offside by the letter of the current law. The ball-tracking chip did what it was designed to do, and FIFA's technical review confirmed the ruling as correct on the protocol. Espen Embolo, on the replays that emerged, absolutely leaned into the contact. The referee, on the pitch, was on his way to booking the wrong man. VAR at least stopped that specific injustice, even if the call it produced instead was worse than the one it prevented. And VAR exists, still, because of the alternative. Because of Maradona's fist. Because of the goal Bruce Arena still can't let go of. Because for decades, this sport was decided over and over again by things nobody was allowed to look at twice. Nobody, when they're being honest, actually wants to go back to that. Arena himself, asked whether he wished VAR had existed in 2002, answered without hesitation, yes. Why wouldn't you want the decisions to be right? His question is the one every honest critic has to answer. Why not make decisions correct? Which brings us to the second half of the Steelman, because there are two innocent parties in this whole story, and we should be fair to both. The referees themselves, the men and women on the field, did not design this system. They did not vote to expand it. Some of them have been made to look worse by VAR than they ever were before it, because now every one of their calls exists in two versions, the one they made in real time with 2 eyes and half a second, and the one the world watches at quarter speed 20 replays later. It is genuinely difficult to overstate how brutal that is as a working condition. Christina Unkel herself, who used to blow the whistle at the top level, has consistently defended referees on this point. Her argument is that the protocol needs to give the human back some discretion, the power to look at a technically correct call and say, no, that's not the spirit of the game, play on. The athletic profile. And England manager Thomas Tuchel, who has no obvious motive to complain, given his team has been on the correct end of most of its decisions, went on the record saying, the referees can send any team out in any moment. It's just, that's not a losing coach lashing out. That's a serious tactician from a semi-favorite saying the officiating creates a coin flip layer over every one of his matches. When even the teams benefiting are saying the system is broken, something has gone genuinely wrong. So no, the answer isn't abolish VAR. The answer is more uncomfortable than that. The technology is usually correct, and it has still, somehow, made football worse. And that is FIFA's actual nightmare. Not a system that is failing, a system that is succeeding at exactly the wrong thing. Because here is the trap they built themselves into, and it's a logical box with no exits. If VAR is wrong, if it disallows goals it shouldn't, if it sends off players it shouldn't, the tournament is unjust and the technology has failed on its own terms. If VAR is right, if the hair follicle offside is really offside, if the microscope really did catch something the referee missed, then the sport has been technically corrected into something nobody wants to watch. A game where celebrations are provisional. A game where you cannot roar until Dallas nods. A game where Luka Modric's 24-year international career ends not on a defeat, but on the width of a follicle detected by a chip in a ball. Both roads lead to the same destination. And the destination is a tournament where the loudest, most repeated, most shared story of the summer isn't a goal, or a save, or a moment of genius. It's the video review. It's the monitor. It's the man in Dallas. FIFA reached for perfection, and they accidentally proved a thing football probably always knew, and had the sense not to test, that perfection is the enemy of the sport. Because football was never supposed to be perfect. It was supposed to be human. Christina Unkel put it more elegantly than I can. Football, she has argued repeatedly on air, is an art form. Messy, subjective, alive. And the pursuit of black and white, machine-verified certainty is sanding all of that away in the name of catching things nobody was asking to have caught. Toenail offsides. Hair follicle offsides. fouls that no player, coach, or fan in the stadium saw in real time, produced from a slow-motion replay under a magnifying glass, and then treated as if the game had ever really been played that way. There is a version of this ending that is genuinely sad, and it belongs to the people who didn't ask for any of it. To Modric, whose international career ended on a decision no human eye could see. To the Iranian players who thought, for 8 seconds, they had made history. To Embolo, sent off for the wrong offense in a review category that wasn't supposed to cover it. To every fan of every federation that has spent this summer wondering whether the sport they love is still theirs or whether it now belongs in some small final way to the machine. FIFA promised us minimum interference and maximum benefit. They delivered maximum interference, and a World Cup in which the most powerful player on the pitch isn't on the pitch at all. That's the nightmare. Not that the machine is broken, that it's working exactly as designed. So I want to hear it from you, honestly. Has VAR ruined this World Cup for you, or would you take the old chaos back tomorrow if it meant your team's goals actually counted when they went in? Drop it below because I read every one of them. And stay with me. The semifinals are here, the biggest decisions of the tournament are still to come, and the screen in Dallas is very much still watching. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens when the next disallowed goal changes a final.